All right. Thanks for all joining here tonight for our COM orientation. For some of you, this will be, just a repeat. Some of it will be new. I'll try to move quickly along, but if after each little section, I have time for questions. So then you can ask the questions and we'll just kind of go from there. And I kind of trying to hit kind of the highlights of things you need to know. The Committee on Ministry is commissioned by the presbytery, meaning it confers powers on the Committee on Ministry to do things that so we don't have to take them to a presbytery meeting. So the presbytery, we're acting on behalf of the presbytery. And what we do is we receive and dismiss members of the ministers of word and sacrament. We approve all of the following aspects of pastoral relationships: all calls and covenants, terms of calls, appointment of moderators, dissolutions and severance, anything to do with the comings and goings. And we also approve validated ministries. So we do not have to go to the presbytery for those things. We do recommend to the presbytery the honorable retirement of ministers, but I do believe we have changed that in the transition. But I got to find that document. It's one of those, in the transition, we did so many documents. Some of them, I think, didn't make it to the webpage. So I have to find that document, but I do believe we've kind of changed that a little bit. But we try to leave retirements up to the presbytery to at least recognize and not, because it's important. But also the big one is the presbytery does still is the only one that has authority to do examinations of candidates for ordination for those who are serving the presbytery. So anybody who is a candidate for ministry that's called to a church in our presbytery, but also we can examine for ordination candidates under care of our presbytery on behalf of other presbyteries if requested. Sometimes, not real often, but once in a while, we'll be asked by a presbytery to examine one of our candidates for ordination and then transfer them, kind of thing. But it still is the presbytery. The COM cannot do that. This big long list is all the responsibilities of the COM. You can find this list in the Dropbox under the handbook or manual of operations. A lot of these come from the Book of Order. We are required by the Book of Order to do these. Open communication, report annually to the presbytery the type of work each minister engages in. We do that through the validated ministries, and also the big large spreadsheet that we do usually September or November each year. We report to the presbytery the establishment and dissolution of pastoral relationships. That goes in our COM report. We counsel with churches regarding calls for permanent and temporary pastoral relationships, provide for the implementation of the EEO for teaching elders and candidates. That's a Book of Order requirement. We provide oversight to congregations without pastors. We do all the aspects of call the process. We promote the peace and harmony of congregations, promote congregational health and vitality, along with the church development team. That's also one of their responsibilities. And we provide encouragement, guidance, resources to congregations. And we are also required by the Book of Order to recommend the minimum terms of call. And then we authorize and train specific ruling elders to administer and preside at the Lord's table. We do that, all that stuff. Any questions so far on our position, on our responsibilities? Okay, next. Now those are our responsibilities that were given to us by the Book of Order and the presbytery. This is the position description of COM members. So to be a COM member, this is your position description. You must be an elder and you must be, or a minister of Word and Sacrament. That is required by the Book of Order. You are, encouraged. I'm not going to say required because we all have things we can't make, in time, but, participate in the monthly meetings or the scheduled meetings of the COM. Serve on a working team. You all have been assigned to a working team. Maintain regular contact and oversight of your churches that you are a liaison to. Work with sessions and pastors to strengthen the health of the congregation, and that's part of your liaison responsibilities. Be available to assist in examination of potential candidates for positions in one of our assigned churches or for a validated ministry, that kind of thing. Work with PNCs in sessions and times of pastoral transition. Serve with an exit interview team as needed. Report to COM if and when a visit of the conflict mediation team or the conflict team appears necessary, and participate in training events sponsored by the COM. Any questions on that? Nice quiet group. See, I told you there'd be a lot of questions. You can ask questions. We also, like with clergy, we do have a code of ethics for COM members. And the first one is probably, the number one, and it's the number one importance. I will keep confidential all information. This is, you all know this is important, but I also will go as far as saying, you don't even tell your spouse. It is confidential. These are people's lives that we're dealing with. So we do need to keep it confidential. I will not give references concerning teaching elders. What we mean by that is sometimes someone will come along and say, well, you're on COM. What do you think about this person? Or what do you know about this person? That is just because of you dealing with confidential information. It's just better not to give references concerning teaching elders. Now, if your pastor comes up and says, will you be a reference for me? That's a different story. But we're just meaning in general, just if someone wants to know about some pastor or something, or some situation in a church, you should not tell them. I will be discreet in the ways I conduct myself as a member of the COM. Mostly it's just, it comes back to that confidentiality. I will treat all my colleagues in churches fairly and equally. And sometimes we find that can be a little difficult because sometimes sessions and sometimes pastors can, behave in ways that we just don't want to treat them fairly because they're acting out. But we have to find that balance between what is good for the pastor and what is good for the church. And there needs to be that fair and equal balance to all of that. I will avoid conflict of interest by recusing myself when dealing with matters of my church or something of personal interest. So in our COM meetings, if your church comes up or your former church or your spouse's church, or you're like best buddies with the pastor of that church, just sort of wave at me or whoever is, hosting the meeting. And just remind us that, you need to be going to the waiting room, and we will put you in the waiting room until that is over. Sometimes I remember, and sometimes I just, we go past some things really fast. And I don't, if it's just a quick, we received the terms of call for this pastor, that's one thing. But if we're going to spend some time talking about a particular church, you really should recuse yourself. I will not use my relationship with other members of the COM to attempt to influence the outcome of the matters. Sometimes, you may have an interest in something and you talk to COM and you want them to, you would like the outcome to come a certain way. It comes back to that recusing yourself because you have a personal interest in it. I will be available within reason to pastors and session members. In that sense, don't let them take up all your time, and set the boundaries of saying, I can't, they send you an email or text at 10 o'clock at night. Just if it's not an absolute emergency, just tell them you'll get back to them the next day, kind of set those boundaries. But also sometimes, especially elders, because they work, they may not be able to reach you until evening. I will be available within reason. I will respect the advice, counsel, and decisions of the COM and its staff. Sometimes we don't agree with all the decisions of the COM, but we need to respect what the group decides. And we need to act as representatives of the COM and fairly represent the position of the COM, and not our personal opinion. We will follow the decision of the group. And we will comply with the Book of Order. And sometimes that's a little hard, but we do need to also make sure we do. I will conduct myself ethically in all ways expected of pastors and elders. Any questions on that one? Or thoughts?
Jean, that code of ethics is in our handbook, right? In the common handbook.
It's all in the handbook, yes.
Yep.
Everything you're going to see tonight, there will be some resource connected to it in the handbook or in the Dropbox. So there's documents to it. So, and this video will be posted, and a link will be available on the handbook. I mean, in the Dropbox, so you can refer back to it. All right. The one thing, the big piece of what you do is you are a liaison to a church or several churches. We do assign those. The liaison list is in the Dropbox. You'll see in the liaisons list. We are still missing, we still need to assign 4 or 5 churches. So if you could look at that and say, yeah, I could do one of those churches, that'd be great. We kind of would like everybody just to, not feel overwhelmed with all the churches you're connected to. 3 to 4 is enough. And if that's too much, let us know. 1 year, one of the pastors who was on COM, we assigned him 4 churches, and they were all, just pretty quiet, nothing going on. And within 8 to 10 months, all churches were in transition. Their pastors had left. So it was Rick Sweeney, who was from New Vernon when he was on. So we did say, Rick, you don't have to do transitions of 4 churches. So we shifted things around. So if there's something you're saying, this is a whole lot, I can't do these other 2, everybody's really good about sharing and just keeping track. So don't feel overwhelmed. Let us know if it's too much. The role of the liaison, you are that formal link between the leaders of a church, the pastor, the CRE, the session members, and the presbytery as you act through COM, and that's actually a Book of Order thing, which you find in G3 point, all the different G3 point things. So your job is to be that link between the presbytery and the congregation and the pastors. Your main role is to learn and listen to what's going on and just be a presence, whether it's just sending notes or emails or just checking in, but letting people know that you are there, that kind of thing. And you also are a resource and a connection to what's going on in the presbytery. As a new presbytery, quite a few of our churches may not have been connected to their former presbytery as much as others, and don't always know what kind of resources they have or have not even seen, a representative of the presbytery in a long time. So this is, a really good chance to kind of just make some connections and say, hey, we're here to help you, to, to answer questions, to support your ministry together. When you, make your first contact, some of you are been, liaisons now for a year or more. You've already made those contacts, but when you make your first contact, do not do it by email, do it by phone. That's just my, kind of my thing, is just make that, personal connection by phone, call the pastor or the clerk and just say, hi, this is who I am. And then just sort of make that first establishment, just maybe call and say, I'd love to come meet your session sometime, or have coffee with you, or even it's just a Zoom call to just, have a time to get to know each other, however you want to do that. So take some time to meet and introduce yourselves. It would be great if once a year you got to a session meeting, or some sort of special event where they know you are there. Yeah, kind of thing, a potluck or a rummage sale or whatever they, doing. So just kind of watch those kind of things and just introduce yourself to the clerk, to the session, and to the pastor. And then just sort of engage and communicate with them. If something is coming along, just send them an email and say, there's going to be this kind of event. You all were talking at your last session meeting about maybe becoming a Matthew 25 church. Did you know that the presbytery is doing a workshop on it? Or, those kind of things. Just kind of say, yeah, did you see this? And just kind of keep those communications open. Or if there's something of interest, you can do that. When you do meet the session, it can be just mostly to say, hi, I'm here. I'm just going to sit through your meeting and just answer any questions and get to know you, that kind of thing. Or a lot of times your first introduction to the session is to do with some sort of transition, and just come with here's some information, here's how we're going to help you move forward, or answer those kind of questions. One of the things you do need to remember is you do not have to take responsibility for the quality of past relationships with the COM and the presbytery. Every church, somebody has a story about how something didn't go well with the Committee on Ministry or the presbytery, and how the presbytery screwed this up or that. You don't have to take any responsibility for that. It happened. That's what it is. And you can just say, I'm here now to help you and be a support to you. You do not have to defend the actions of the previous presbytery. You do not have to defend the actions of the presbytery leader or anyone like that, which may have created an unfortunate rift or a barrier between the church and its leaders. You do not have to defend that. You just listen to their story, and that's all you really need to do. You do want to have your eyes and ears open to to all the signs and signals that indicate that what attitudes of the church and the leader may have towards the church. You do want to do that, but you don't have to defend it. Just pay attention, because that might be helpful. You come back and say, Jean, I met with them, and they're really mad at the last presbytery for doing this. And that's a helpful piece of information for us to, be aware of as we work with that particular congregation. You might want to get on their mailing list, on their Facebook, any other social media they may have, just to find out what's going on. And if possible, I know for clergy it's a little harder, attend a worship service or a special event or something along that lines. The other roles, other things of the liaison, is you are their shepherd during the times of transition. So when a pastor leaves or a pastor is coming, that's really our key role of helping them through that transition. And we have a lot of training that we've been doing around that, and we'll continue to do that. So you are comfortable with that. There are a lot of people who've done it before, other COM members who can walk with you if this is the first time you've had to do that. Be in tune for any conflict. You do not have to deal with conflicted situations on your own. You're not expected to even be a conflict manager or a conflict guru. We have quite a few people in this presbytery trained to do that. Your job is to say, if you notice something that is not right and it feels like a conflict, or they call you and tell you, which is more likely that there's a conflict, your next phone call is to me. And we will then talk through what that looks like and what needs to happen next. You do not have to have answers to every question right at your fingertips. It's probably even best to say you'll promise to find out the information or convey a concern or question, and just then follow up with it, asking, looking in the handbook, or giving me a call, or John a call, or Jackie, or other COM members who may know the answers. So that's do not feel, if they ask you a question, it's just best to say, I'm gonna have to get back to you on that one. I don't know. Any questions? Nice quiet group.
I don't mean to break the quiet, but I just have a question. So if is there a list in the Dropbox? I haven't gotten a chance to look there, of who Amy Sandlin's people are or Carol Skidmore's people are, so that
Yeah.
if somebody reaches out to one of us, we can just say, oh, actually your liaison is,
Right.
or what's the way we should handle that if that happens?
There is a liaison list in the Dropbox, and it's under the file liaisons. It is up to date as of 4:30 today. And you can look there for your churches that you've been assigned. You may still need to be assigned. You and Amy may still need to be assigned. I can't remember. But we do, if you'll see on there, there's like 4 or 5 blanks. And that's for any of you. If you want to say I'll be a liaison to that church, let me know. So that is in there. So yes, so if someone calls you because they know you, Heather, and they'll say, I know you're on COM and this is the issue. The best thing to do is to say, thank you, and your COM liaison is so-and-so. Can I help you connect to them? Other questions? All right, this is like real quick. These are things you all should know, but I just thought I'd put it in there. These are our major categories for pastoral relationships. Just last night, I was meeting with a session on trying to help them understand what their pastor's role was, because their former presbytery told them one thing and then put them in the General Assembly code as something different. So everybody was confused, but we got to sort it out. There is installed pastoral relationships. These are the ones that this is a congregational call. This is the pastor nominating committee. This is the formal process that most of us know. Then there is the covenant relationships. Other presbyteries may give them different names, but we kind of give this an umbrella. But this is all those relationships that come with a contract or a covenant. So it would be a supply pastor, an interim or transitional pastor, a bridge pastor, a shared pastor, which you notice a shared pastor can also be installed. These are the ones that the session calls into an agreement. Then there's the commission ruling elder, and then validated ministry, which is the chaplains, the professors, and those who are not in a parish situation. There's a few little off to the side that I don't even know we have any, but these are the main ones that we have. These can be full-time, they can be part-time. We have a rubric in the Dropbox for helping people who, maybe want a half-time pastor, but if you ever seen some of those position descriptions, it's just a half-time pastor who's supposed to do all the work in 20 hours instead of 40. The rubric kind of says, if you want someone 20 hours, this is what you can expect. You can't have it all. So there's that. So that's pastoral relationships. For us, one of the new things we added to our policy on pastoral relationships is we added the General Assembly ecclesiastical codes. So we can be very distinct of what we're talking about. So you will also see in the relationship policy, there's a number that is the General Assembly ecclesiastical code. So when we're talking a supply pastor, we're talking about a 108. When we're talking about an interim pastor, we're talking about a 105. One of the things you also deal with in pastoral relationships is the pastor is leaving. There's also a lot of documents in the Dropbox that cover this. This is one particular document, OFA document, that when the pastor is leaving, it says the pastor contracts with the COM liaison and others. It should say contact the COM liaison or others. Pastor notifies the session agrees and calls a congregational meeting, only for installed pastors. Session plans for celebration of ministry. Sometimes they forget to do that because they're so anxious about what's going to happen afterwards. They forget you're supposed to have a party. I kind of sometimes have to remind them. Session and pastor communicate the dissolution with the congregation. The COM does exit interviews with the pastor and the session separately. They don't do them together. The pastor writes up the interviews for the church's files. In the Dropbox, there are files. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the pastor and the session complete a dissolution agreement. There's two things: dissolution agreement and separation ethics. And I missed one at a session meeting not too long ago. But the dissolution agreement is that saying the pastor is last Sunday is this day, their last pay date is this date. They get so many, they get 2 weeks vacation. They will vacate the manse at such and such a date, that kind of thing. So it's just those kind of, we write those things down. We've learned that if we don't, it sometimes comes back to bite people. So we just say, just write it down. What all the things you agree about. And there are suggestions in there. The separation ethics is a different form. And that basically says when the pastor leaves, and explains that you're no longer the pastor, therefore you don't do funerals, weddings, baptisms, that kind of thing. And the pastor agrees to that. And then the session agrees not to call on the pastor to be the pastor anymore. So this is one of the things you do need to review with the pastor and the session, and everybody needs to sign that. And then the COM approves those dissolution agreements and receives the separation ethics covenant. And sometimes they put extra things in the covenant. Most of the time they just go with what we have on there. The search process, this is the only slide I have on this because there's a whole other training, but the liaison is the shepherd for the search process for the congregation, and that's a different training event, but I just put that in there. And I just have pictures of things growing because I want spring to come. Any questions?
Yeah, Gene, what's a designated pastor and how does that differ from the other pastoral
Thank-
relations?
A designated pastor is designated for a particular period of time. Often it is longer than what you would do for like an interim is usually a couple plus, plus or minus years. A designated pastor may be for 3 to 4 years. Often it's used after a congregation has gone through some sort of trauma or has just had some difficulties, a conflict, that kind of thing, and just needs someone with some specialized skills. In a designated pastor position, it is still a congregational call, but the search, the MIF is kind of developed by both the COM and the PNC. And then the PIFs, the personal information forms, do not go directly to the PNC, they go to the COM. Well, actually, they come to me and then the COM. And the people are vetted ahead of time to make sure they have the skills that that particular church needs. And then they are given to the PNC to review. We don't use it real often, kind of thing. Once in a while, we did do with Hackettstown just recently because they had gone through a trauma, and we used a designated pastor for that. And Bedminster had a designated pastor before coming into the new presbytery, and we just recently approved Caroline to become the installed pastor. The designated pastor can become the next installed pastor, upon approval of the Committee on Ministry. Sometimes, everybody, depending on what it is, they may decide that, come the end of that designated period, everybody's fine and the relationship just moves on. Most of the time, they usually stay on. Once or twice they don't. Other questions about that?
Is the designated the only one that can go on to be considered for a call if they move to a broad position?
An interim pastor cannot be the next called pastor in any way, shape, or form. However, the covenant supply pastor can, and our policy is very intentionally vague on this, can become an installed pastor after a period of time and in consultation with the Committee on Ministry. So if the supply pastor has been there, 3-4 years, and they're not, and it's everything's going well, and the pastor wants to stay, and that works out, they can request that the pastor become installed. We did that several years ago with the Belvedere Church. Pamela was a covenant supply, and she'd been there 4 or 5 years, and then they said, could she become our installed pastor? She's not leaving us, that kind of thing. The only difference between, in that if you are a covenant supply pastor, you by book of order, you are not required to participate in the Board of Pensions. But by our policy, if you are 20 hours or more, no matter what, if you're installed or a supply, the church does have to provide pension benefits, meaning medical, pension, and disability. If a covenant pastor can demonstrate that they have medical elsewhere, like with a spouse, then they can be exempt from that can be waived, but they still have to provide pension and death and disability, which 5 or 6 years ago, that was a little harder. Now the Board of Pensions, you can do that easily. You can be in that. If you are installed, even if your spouse has medical, you still have to, you are required by book of order to participate in the pastor participation of the Board of Pensions. So you have no choice. So you end up with 2, basically medical, if your spouse also has that. Yes, so that's a long way around saying, yes, there are other ways to become installed. And answer your question the long way around, Rich.
All good, thank you.
Other questions? In the Dropbox, these are the policies, and there's a retirement policy missing, and I've got to find it, but these are the policies that are in the Dropbox right now. I'm not going to go over each of one of them. Some of these we just approved as a team, within the last 2 years ourselves. But there's the clergy renewal leave policy, the child and youth protection policy, sexual misconduct policy, ethical standards of ministers. The child protection policy, the sexual misconduct, and the ethical standards, all incoming pastors must read and sign a form saying they have read it. So that is something you do not have to chase after that. Sonia does. Sonia will chase after every pastor, make sure they have signed off on all those forms. So that's one thing. There is a background check also policy. You can find the application form for the background check on our webpage and also in the Dropbox. But Sonia will also chase after all incoming pastors for that. There is a study leave policy, a session exemption waiver policy, exit interview, separation ethics confident we just talked about. There is a family leave policy, minimum terms of call, validated ministry policy, and commission ruling elders policy in our Dropbox.
When you say session exemption, is that the when folks need to serve more than 6 years?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
And Amy, you and I have had that question, and I almost have an answer for you. I will tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions? Also in there, and I forgot to add that slide, but there are guidelines for like ordination, installation. Those are also in there. Those are not necessarily policies. They're just guidelines of how we do it, kind of thing. Are there any questions about policies, guidelines? Just about everything that's in your Dropbox should be on the web page. If it's something that all pastors, or churches need to see. If it's something very specific to COM, it's only in the Dropbox. You won't find it online, kind of. All right. Last part is the structure of COM. As most of you know, that we have 3 teams that cover all the non-liaison stuff, kind of thing. The first is the clergy care team. All these teams also kind of share work. If like one has a whole lot of work and another doesn't, we may ask, if clergy care has a lot of work, we may pass something to congregational care and say, would you review this and do that? So we do share things back and forth. The COM moderators make that decision, a few days before or a week before the COM meeting. So you get an email and say, these are the things you have to do, and that's because the COM moderators have assigned it to you. But for the most part, this is what the clergy care team does. They do entry and exit interviews, pastoral care and referrals. They deal with, pastoral care, individual pastoral care. Same with clergy CRE, educators kind of care. Board of pensions issues when dealing with the individual members, oversight of the clergy care fund and applications. They deal with validated specialized ministries, educational opportunities, and policies and guidelines as assigned. The clergy care team deals with staffing, pastoral search process, training PNCs, that kind of thing. Mostly under policy and procedures, they review those kind of things. They're not responsible for every PNC. That's the liaison. Review ministry information forms or position descriptions of supply pastors. They also do the exit interviews for sessions. And they do policy and guideline development as assigned. And the pastor parish team reviews terms of call, covenant agreements, and renewals of temporary supply pastor kind of things, ordination and installation commissions and reports, board of pensions when it's dealing with things beyond the individual medical pension information interpretation, policy guidelines developments as renewed. They also review clergy renewal policies and any educational opportunities as assigned. Meetings of COM are normally the first Tuesday of the month. A year or so ago, someone wanted to know if we could change that. That did not go over well. So it is still the first Tuesday of the month. Summer may be a slightly different schedule just because it's summer. We start at 6:30 with work teams, followed by the COM meeting. Most of the time we're done within 2 hours, now and again a little longer. Special meetings, there are special meetings for exit interviews and entrance exams, that kind of thing. And you may be called upon for special teams for specific situations. And all the other stuff, all work is kept in the Dropbox. If you cannot access, you should have gotten an invitation. If you have not gotten an invitation, please let me know. If you cannot access it even after you've received the Dropbox, contact Sonia at the Presbytery office and she will help you figure it out. Most of the meetings of COM since the pandemic and beyond will be done by Zoom. Now that there were, as a larger presbytery, as someone put it, they don't want to be driving to Southern Hunterdon County in January, in the dark. I get it. So they've all kind of said, let's continue by Zoom. Occasionally we may want to meet in person. The Dropbox contents, there's other things, but mostly you'll find the liaison list that Heather was asking about. That is there and up to date. There is the handbook. The handbook has everything you need to know organized, and you can, it used to be like a chartreuse folder, it's now just a handbook in the Dropbox. There's training infos from previous training events. There's PNC info and resources, everything you need in there. So sometimes that thing you may look at and say, Jean, this isn't up to date. Let us know, we'll bring it up to date. There is the contact list for the for the COM is in there, and the Presbytery directory. Sonia is very good about updating the directory and puts it in the new one as soon as she has it. So that constantly changes. Meeting information is in there. If you'll go in, you'll see meeting 2023 meeting documents, then it'll be by month, and then there will be the meeting documents for that meeting. And if you have documents for the COM, put it in the folder for that particular meeting. If there isn't a folder yet, make one and put it in there. And then terms of call information, and there's other things like resource sheets and things like that. And all the policies are in there somewhere. So that's our orientation. So now it's time for questions or anything else you may have.